this is Fiona Cuthbertson coming from the pod to record another episode of Off the Cuff. This week, we're lucky enough to have Rob Rams for our third election special. Rob has over 18 years political experience. His first major role was as Chief of Staff to the current Deputy Speaker, Right Honourable Nigel Evans. Since then, he's worked as Chief of Staff to the Conservative London Assembly team, where he worked closely with the ex-Prime Minister Boris Johnson, and has also been a special advisor to Right Honourable Theresa Villiers when she was Secretary of State for the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. Most recently, he was the Chief Public Affairs Officer at the Association of British Insurers. Welcome, Rob.
Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. Delighted to be joining you today.
Excellent stuff. So first things first, can you tell us a little bit about your political career?
Well, as you set out quite eloquently at the beginning, I've had nearly 20 years now of experience working around the Westminster bubble. First of all, starting, as you said, with Nigel Evans MP, which is a real education on how to work in Westminster, how to run a parliamentary office, how just to be a fabulous constituency MP, because that's what Nigel is and continues to be to this day. And I owe much of my success to the training that Nigel gave me. From there, after spending 7 wonderful years working for Nigel, I was honoured to be asked to move over to City Hall just as Boris was selected to be the candidate for the Mayor of London. And it was an incredible 8 years being right by Boris's side. We did things like the Olympics, events with Boris were very special. Walking down Golders Green High Street was one of my greatest memories of my time with him, when people literally just wanted to come out on the streets and touch him and have photos with him. But then Sadiq becomes mayor, and I decided, well, I've probably got to get a proper job now, and moved into the world of insurance. Did some time with Ageas, an insurance company that most people have never heard of unless you're a cricket fan, and then went on to the Association of British Insurers. In between that, I describe as the accidental spad. Not many people at 40 years old get the chance to become a special advisor, and I had a great opportunity under Boris as Prime Minister to spend time at DEFRA, as you said, with Theresa Villiers, who's also my local MP, who I spend a lot of time on the door with at the moment. And now I'm just freelancing, doing a bit of work with candidates. I'm helping Sybil Wiggin MP out at the moment, and just enjoying an election campaign.
Absolutely, and we're certainly going to get to the nuts and bolts of the election and what's going on in a few minutes. But first of all, can you tell us what the highlight of your career has been?
There's been many. I'm very fortunate working, as I said, with Boris during the Olympics. My time at DEFRA when we brought in post-Brexit legislation to benefit farmers, did stuff on animal welfare, banning of importing of trophy hunting, things like that. But the proudest thing is not something that people really think about, is some work I did with an all-party parliamentary group. I'm very lucky that I have worked for the last 3 years, and don't laugh when I say this, with the all-party parliamentary group on wrestling. And people laugh, say, well, how can that be the proudest thing of your career? Well, let me tell you a story. Lockdown, there was very sadly a Me Too movement in British wrestling, where female British wrestlers put their hands up and said, we've been raped, we've been sexually abused by male wrestlers and male wrestling coaches. Because wrestling is the last unregulated industry in this country. You could set up a wrestling school in your back garden, and there are absolutely no checks and balances on it whatsoever. There's no governing body. There's nobody looking after this. And wrestling is, my wife says I never grew up. I still love wrestling to this day as a 44-year-old. And wrestling has been a part of my life, and myself, and I'm sure many people who listen to this podcast know a gentleman called Danny Stone, who runs the Anti-Semitism Trust. Danny and I would go to wrestling all the time. We became wrestling journalists. Whenever wrestlers came over from America, we'd show them around Parliament. For a while, I had my own podcast doing interviews with wrestlers in Parliament. My favourite one, you should check out The Royal Ramblings, where James Cleverly comes and joins us. So this Me Too movement happened, and Danny and I thought that it'd be good to be able to do something and make it different. And unbeknown to us, there were a couple of MPs who were having exactly the same thought. Mark Fletcher, the MP for Bolsover, and Alex Davis-Jones, the Member of Parliament for Pontypridd, were having exactly the same conversations. And somehow the four of us found each other, and we set up this all-party parliamentary group. At the beginning of lockdown, we took evidence. Sometimes the evidence was harrowing. To hear stories of, very sadly, women being passed round and abuse being used as a way of favours and things like that. And we wrote a report, and it is one of the proudest things I've done in politics. The report hit all the front pages, the MPs were interviewed on all the political shows, and it is now safer for female British wrestlers because of the work that we've done. And we continue to do. We're looking at things like ring safety at the moment. We're looking at things like getting the Arts Council to take over governorship of wrestling shows. Because, yes, wrestling is fake, but it's still a performance. We're looking at the Sports Council to take over governorship of wrestling academies. Again, with all of that comes things like the CRB checks and things put in place to protect the people taking part. So I know that was a long-winded answer, but that to me is something that I've been able to do and has made a real difference to people's lives.
Yes, absolutely. And that is one of the things about politics, isn't it? That you really want to make a difference. And of course, again, you're working cross-party because it was both Labour and Conservative MPs that you were clearly working with, setting up and running the APPG. And of course, we are now halfway through the election period where all the MPs are trying to show what they've done for their local communities and what the government has done for the country. So now the government have been in power for a long time, which always translates to a harder battle regarding winning the hearts and minds of the electorate. Can they achieve this?
I honestly don't think they can. And it pains me to say this. As somebody that was in around number 10 at the 2019 election, where the Conservative Party came out with a huge majority, it kills me to say that I can't tell you what a Conservative government has done since 2019. And when you're knocking on doors, and you've got to try and persuade people to say, vote for the Conservative Party, I don't know what that message is anymore. And that message is now turned, as you said, to it's about the local candidate, how wonderful that local candidate, which in reality, that's really what elections should be about as well. But the national issues take prominence as well. And I'm struggling to see what we've achieved since 2019. And as I said, that kills me more than anything else. I think we've got our messaging wrong. It's been far too negative. I think we're quite easy and able to stand up and say what the Labour Party are going to do and attack them for that. But we very rarely put our head above the parapet and say what we're going to do. And I find that very strange and very, very odd.
And the manifestos have been launched now. So what do you think are going to be the main policy differences between the parties that will take centre stage?
I think there are probably two. So first of all, I think tax will continue to play a central role in everything that's going on. The Tories continue to push this difference between them and the Labour Party in terms of taxation. The Labour Party manifesto said there was a 7.4 billion tax rises, mainly on private education, non-doms, where the Conservative Party continue to push that they're going to cut taxes by £17 billion. I think people are getting bored of that argument from both sides. The polls aren't moving anywhere near that. So I'm splitting my time this election between Chipping Barnet and North Herefordshire, two very different constituencies. One London constituency, one very rural constituency, North Herefordshire. To be fair, the levy on private schools is having an impact on the door in North Herefordshire, where there are a lot more private schools people are sending to, and it will have an impact on them. In London, not so much. But also, I think health will also be another interesting area. You look at Wes, the Labour health spokesman at the moment, or Shadow Secretary of State, and I'm sure soon to be Secretary of State. Very much one of the rising stars of the party. Somebody who is excellent in front of the media, and therefore health will become and continue to become a huge dividing line. And we continue to allow the political parties to play down the NHS and say it's bad, it's not working. The NHS in its current form isn't perfect. It never will be perfect, but it's bloody good. I'm a type 1 diabetic. I use the NHS all the time. The nurses are incredible. Doctors are amazing. I see them when I want. They're in contact like 24 hours a day. It's not worth going private because the best service is on the NHS. My family, again, have used it recently in other forms. We had an issue and we had a referral. The referral was made on a Friday. We had an appointment on the Monday. I think politicians need to stop putting it down the whole time.
You mentioned that you are working in two different constituencies at the moment. How are you finding that? And what are the main differences between the constituencies as you're going out on the streets?
You can't get two more different constituencies from Chipping Barnet and North Herefordshire. North Herefordshire, Sir Bill Wiggins' constituency, beautiful, rural, tiny little villages, pub in every village, few houses. Campaigning is very, very different to the way that you do it in London. But North Herefordshire is an interesting example because the Greens have made it, I think it's either number 1 or number 2 on their target list. And they are throwing, or they have thrown lots of money at it. They are making it a real fight for Sir Bill Wiggin. I think he'll get over the line, but it'll be very close. It won't be anywhere near the size of the majority, which I think is about 25 to 30,000 at the moment. So you're seeing issues there around farming. Farming is the centre of everything that goes on there. And as I said before, the issue up there is with VAT around rural policing. I met a lovely old man the other day in a village. The village is basically a T-junction, and one police force has the road at one end, and the other police force has the road that makes the T. And one police station is 5 yards away, and the other one's 5 miles away. And the one that's 5 miles away never comes down the road. There's a strong and growing reform support. It's very white, middle to upper class. Immigration is an issue, and all the issues like that, which you just don't really get in London. Barnet is made up of 3 constituencies. You did have Mike Freer in Finchley and Golders Green, Thatcher's old seat, Matthew Offord in Hendon, and Teresa Villiers in Chipping Barnet. 3 strong Conservative seats in London. It's a straight fight between Tory and Labour. At the last council elections, the council that covers all of that, Barnet Council, became Labour. And Sir Keir turned up the next morning with a large group of people claiming victory and then targeting the 3 seats there. So in Chipping Barnet, we've got a real fight on our hands. Teresa is a good local MP. She works hard. She's been there 20 odd years now. But the issues that are coming up are more local issues, actually, with the local hospital, which is having a car park closed next week. But there is a real movement, as I'm sure you and your listeners are aware, against the Tory party in London. And with the wave that wave will have, as much as I would love all 3 seats to say Conservative, I think the Conservatives are in real trouble in those 3 seats. They've got good young candidates in the other 2 who've been energetic, who've campaigned lots. So they may just hold on, but we'll wait and see.
It does sound like it's very hard on the doorstep, certainly in London. And what values do you think are the most important that each party should encapsulate during the election to try and move the vote in their direction?
Honestly, I think people are getting pissed off, if I'm allowed to use that word here. I will always argue that 99.9% of those that get elected are good people. But the reaction on the door is very, very different. That they're all crooks. They're all in it for the money. Well, if you're going to want to make money, you're not going to become an MP. And that's a controversial thing to say. And people, my wife especially, hates it when I say that. But you could go into the private sector and earn considerably more money than you're going to earn becoming an MP. Now, don't get me, it's a nice wage, well above the average wage. But all parties need to get the honesty back into politics. And that will help elections, but they need to do more to get that back.
And if you were running the election campaign, what would you do to make sure you touch the people and get their vote?
For the Conservative Party, I'd move them back to the centre. That's where the future of the Conservative Party has to be. It shouldn't be moving to the right. It shouldn't be appeasing Reform, Farage. The Conservative Party is the greatest political party of all time. It is one that adapts and one that changes. It always survives, and it will survive, but it needs to get back to its centre-right roots. That's the party that I signed up for, and it's appealing to people that want more money in their pockets, understand the state can't do everything, your typical Conservative values, and not play to the far-right anti-immigration policy playbook that is led by Reform and specifically Farage.
Talking of Farage, what impact do you think Reform will have on the Conservative vote? And do you think he's going to win this election to Parliament?
So undoubtedly it will and has an impact. For those that haven't knocked on doors, you see what they've told you before, how long they've been telling you which way they're going to vote. And we are seeing strong Conservative voters moving to Reform. It's a frustration generally with the party, a way of them protest voting. So I think it will have an impact. I think it'll have more of an impact in inner London on Chipping Barnet than it will in the rural constituencies. But even there, we see some Reform vote, not to the same extent that you're seeing in inner London. Do I think Farage will win? I was actually reading in the papers today, but plan for Conservative Central Office is to bring Boris back Boris, to appease those people who are thinking of voting Reform and helping get those switches back. And I think that can only be a good thing. But Boris has many faults, many faults. I'm very grateful for the opportunities that he has given me over the years. He's been very kind to me and my family. When Joe and I got married, he wrote a wonderful letter. Robert, this is the big one. Don't fuck it up. Was the exact letter that he wrote us, which I got framed. But to the core Tory vote, he's somebody that can get that core Tory vote out. And that is what is needed in this election, those voters coming out. It's going to be a low turnout election. But if that core Tory vote does come out and comes out for Conservatives, there is a chance it's not going to be quite as bad as everybody predicts it. And I think he can be that face to get that core vote out.
You talk obviously about your time with Boris. You've also spent some time at CCHQ. So can you give a little insight as to what the mood is like over there at all?
I was there a couple of months ago working with Susan Hall. Rick Holden, party chairman, very kindly got in contact and said, would you like to help out the Susan Hall campaign? Which I was delighted to do. I've known Susan for many years through my association with the London Assembly. I actually turned up and there was on the manifesto written, so my first job was to actually, 4 weeks out from the election, was to write her manifesto with the help of those in the team and policy ideas that I'd been developing at City Hall 15 years ago. But the mood in CCHQ was mixed. Because I don't think anybody, in all honesty, expected the election to be now. And so it was quite jovial. It was hardworking, as they always are. But I really feel that it's a classic example, and I don't mean anything rude or bad to any of the people, that they needed some more adults in the room. It really feels that it's a place being run by kids at the moment. And which is, I can understand it. Look, we're not the fashionable party at the moment. We're not, if you're going to go and choose to work somewhere, why would you come and work for the Conservative Party at the moment? And I understand that. And the people that are working are credible. But it just felt like there needs to be some more adults in the room there. Some more sensible heads who've been through this before, who knows what it's like.
Can give it a bit of structure.
Give it a bit of structure, yes, absolutely. And it just didn't feel that it had that. And again, as I said, right, no disrespect to anybody that works there, because they're doing absolutely incredible job under very testing circumstances. I've never worked in CCHQ during the election campaign. I know people who have, and it's hellish. And they tell me it's absolutely hellish. And so they must be working all the hours of the day, not seeing sunlight at the moment, monitoring through the night, all those sort of things. And I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, because it is hard work for not a huge amount of pay, I would imagine.
And do you think social media is going to have an impact on the election?
I've long argued social media is in the real world. I've actually been quite impressed by all parties' use of social media. All parties have really upped their game in terms of what they're producing and how they're producing it. Elections are still won on the doors, are still won through television, through newspapers, because that is where the majority of people are actually getting their information from. Look, I live online and I've got a few thousand followers, but this new feature, for example, on X, which shows you how many people have actually seen your tweet, only ever a couple of hundred in reality that's really ever seen it. And so I might think, oh, I've got a few thousand followers, I'm quite influential. I'm not influential at all. And people on social media already have their views. You can't change people's views on social media. But I think the parties are using more. I saw a figure just the other day which showed that Labour in the first couple of weeks of the election had outspent the Conservatives on Facebook advertising. For me, that's interesting, but the demographics of people using Facebook versus those that now use Insta and TikTok is very, very different. And I'd be more interested, and I don't have the answer, to learn how much the parties are spending on those platforms, which is a much younger demographic, which are more, I would argue, susceptible to these sort of things. And I think we need to see where the spending is going on, the influence that is going to be having, rather than just on Facebook.
And what do you think can be done to ensure that messages on social media relay the truth, considering the emergence of deep fakes as well?
Well, I think it's really interesting. There was the case just a few weeks ago of, I think it was Wes Streeting, who had a deep fake done of him. And he came out immediately and said, look, this isn't me. It got covered. National newspapers, it wasn't him. I think the problem is that people want to believe that some of these deep fakes are real. But credit to the government here. I think they've been a world leader on AI and this sort of thing. I just think it needs to be called out and monitored more. I think people need to be honest. People need to say when these things happen. The truth, though, is that it's very difficult to spot, very difficult to stop. Once it's out, once something's online, it's online, and it's very to recall it. We all know about the bots that are based in Russia or wherever else in the world, and the influence that they could possibly be having on this election. But that's why I think we need to move away from social media to some extent and use more of the traditional medias to get over the message.
And back to the doorsteps.
And back to the door, absolutely back to the doorsteps. That's where, as I said before, elections are won. People out there appreciate the knock on the door. appreciate the discussion, appreciate the time, especially when you're with a candidate. There's nothing that can beat that in a million years.
No, absolutely not. And are you positive for the future?
I am. I'm positive for the Conservative Party's future. I think key is going to be who's left, because whatever happens, numbers are going to be down considerably. I hope I get to play a part in what's next for the Conservative Party. I think there's a chance, as I said before, about moving back to the centre. I think that needs to be done. I think we need to create a credible alternative, a credible opposition. I think whereas in 2019 I was worried about a Labour government, as a North London Jew with Jeremy Corbyn as leader, I was worried. I had discussions with my wife about how we'd leave the country if he became Prime Minister, of school friends and things like that. Always that was a discussion that was had. That's gone away now. Credit to Sakir for that. And so I'm not worried, and I'm positive about the future. I would disagree with 95% of what they do, but I'm not scared where I was before. So yeah, I am positive for the future, and I think I'm looking forward to this election being over. I'm looking forward to seeing what the future holds.
And on that note, thank you, Rob, for using your experience to share your insight into how this election is unfolding, especially, as you say, considering it is so difficult for the Conservative Party at the moment. Thank you to the listeners who've hopefully enjoyed the show as much as we've enjoyed making it. As I've said before, please remember you must go out and vote on the 4th of July. As always, if you have any questions regarding the podcast, please feel free to comment. If you think it's worth coming back, please like and subscribe. If you feel you need something to tide you over to the next podcast, please buy my book Party Games on Amazon. And on that note, I'll see you next time. Hope you have a good week, one and all.